Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So right now, the federal government is on the verge of a government shutdown because Democrats and Republicans, quite frankly, as usual, can't get on the same page and fund either a temporary or more permanent funding bill to fund the government. So on October 1st, if they're not able to get on the same page and pass a temporary funding bill, then the government will shut down. What is that going to mean for October Social Security payments if they're not able to fund the government and keep it open? In today's video, we're going to be covering everything that you need to know. But before we go ahead and dive into it for today, if you would like to receive up to $200 in free stock or $200 in free cash, in a pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Robinhood. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then simply link your bank account. You do not even have to make an opening deposit. At that point in time, Robinhood will be sending you one free stock worth all the way up to $200. And if you really just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stock is just sell it for what it's worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so diving right into it for today. So once again, we are on the verge of another government shutdown coming up in just about a week if Democrats and Republicans can't get on the same page. Now, I will start this out by saying that usually things like this just seem to work themselves out at the very last minute. Republicans and Democrats pass some sort of temporary funding bill. We don't actually see the government shut down. But also at the same time, the last time we did have a government shutdown was between December 2018 and January 2019. Trump was also in office. This was the longest shutdown actually in our country's history. It lasted right around 35 days. It was over funding for a border wall between U.S. and Mexico. This time it is a little bit different though. It's more so, I guess, the Democrats, you could say, they're holding it up over funding for healthcare. And Republicans don't seem like they're budging on the issue. Will they be able to work out a resolution? We will have to wait and see. But what is this going to do as far as Social Security payments go in October? Could they be delayed or perhaps not go out at all until November? Once again, in today's video, we are going to be covering everything that you need to know. So first off, according to ABC News, Congress is out of town this week. But when lawmakers return on Monday, September 29th, they'll be facing an immediate government funding deadline. If Congress doesn't act before Wednesday, October 1st, there will be a government shutdown. Right now, congressional leaders are busy blaming one another for the looming shutdown, but no clear path is emerging for how funding might be approved. Here's what you need to know with less than a week until a possible government shutdown. So first off, what needs to happen to avert this from happening? So the government runs out of funding as the clock strikes midnight from Tuesday, September 30th to Wednesday, October 1st. To avoid that shutdown, Congress must pass either a short-term funding bill called a continuing resolution or CR, or they must approve 12 separate full-year funding bills. Congress does not have time to finish work on this full-year funding bills before the deadline, so they need a stopgap bill. Now, unlike the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, funding bills need at least 60 votes to pass in the Senate. That means that any government funding solution will require at least 7 Senate Democrats to pass if every Republican supports the proposal. And in a Washington under total Republican control, government funding is one of a few must-pass pieces of legislation that require Democratic votes. So that is very important there. This is one piece of legislation that will need to be bipartisan. They need at least 7 Democrats to join all 53 Republicans, assuming that all 53 Republicans are on the same page, which doesn't necessarily always happen. So we will need both Democrats and Republicans on board with this bill in order for it to pass, because again, in the Senate, they need at least 60 votes for this bill to pass. Now, as far as the current state of play goes, Democrats and Republicans are currently locked in a staring contest. It's not clear what, if anything, will be done to stop a shutdown next week. Efforts to pass a short-term funding bill failed last week, and on Friday, House Republicans and one Democrat passed a bill that would have kept the government funded until November 20th, but within hours of the House action, Senate Democrats blocked the measure from passing the Senate and instead offered their own funding bill that included a number of healthcare provisions that Democrats say are essential. Republicans blocked that bill from advancing in the Senate. So essentially, Democrats are wanting to adds certain healthcare provisions in this bill. Republicans are against any extra spending, and they can't really seem to work out their differences here. Now, they go on here to say the Republicans on Capitol Hill want Congress to pass a short-term funding bill without any additional add-ons to keep the government funded at fiscal year 2024 levels through November 20th. Republicans say this will allow more time for Congress to work on the annual appropriations bills that they hope can be enacted before the next funding deadline. The White House has backed this approach. Democrats, on the other hand, want to use the funding deadline as leverage to secure healthcare-related wins and to restore cuts to Medicaid made by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act the Republicans passed back in July. So again, they're not able to get on the same page. If the government does shut down come October 1st, and let's just say, hypothetically speaking, let's say that we have like another 30 plus day shutdown, much like we had from December 2018 through January 2019 in Trump's first term. If that happens, and the government shuts down throughout the entire month of October, what would that mean for Social Security payments? Would they still go out, or perhaps would you just receive like a double payment in November? We're going to be covering this article here by Kiplinger that sort of talks about that, and thankfully some good news offered in this article. So they say that the U.S. government is facing the prospect of yet another shutdown as lawmakers wrangle over a temporary funding bill. That's leaving many people wondering how Social Security would be affected if the federal government shuts its doors on September 30th, 2025 at midnight. Fortunately, the Social Security Administration is one of the government agencies that has put together detailed contingency plans outlining the services that it would continue and pause in case of a shutdown. In the missive laying out its plan, the agency said, quote, "We will continue activities critical to our direct service operations and those needed to ensure accurate and timely payments of benefits. We will cease activities not directly related to the accurate and timely payment of benefits or not critical to our direct service operations." So one thing is clear. Even if the U.S. government shuts down on September 30th at midnight, you will continue to receive your Social Security checks and disability payments. The reason that Social Security payments will continue is that they are considered, quote, mandatory spending, and they are funded under a trust, which is not part of the annual appropriations process. So obviously, very good news there. Even if the government does shut down on September 30th, despite, millions of Americans possibly being impacted in their jobs, not having a job to go to, and we're even talking about those jobs being, laid off permanently now by the Trump administration. We'll have to see what happens with that. Thankfully, at least, Social Security payments will continue to go out in full and on time in October. You won't have to worry about missing your October payment because of a possible shutdown. And again, I don't really expect this to happen. I do think that at the very last second, Democrats and Republicans, as usual, will scoop out and come up with a plan together, and they will get this signed into law, at least on a temporary basis. It seems like every single time this happens where we get close to a government shutdown, we think it's going to happen, and then it doesn't actually happen. But again, back in Trump's first term, we did have a government shutdown because Republicans and Democrats played chicken for too long, and we ended up in a government shutdown for a record for our nation, once again, at 35 days. Completely crazy. Will we see something else like that happen, or will we just see the usual where they play a game of chicken, and at the very last second, the very last hour, right before midnight, we end up striking a deal and we get that bill signed into law and we don't actually have a government shutdown? We will have to wait and see, but thankfully, checks for Social Security will continue to go out in full and on time in October, regardless of what happens. But with that said, that's all we have for today's video. I certainly hope you enjoyed and found value out of it, and I will see you in the next one.